Hello, everyone. This is Ryan Fratsky, the head of sales and marketing at Fratsky Media. I'm so glad to see you here today on the webinar. If you joined us last month, you got to see some of the great data that we were collecting. And guess what? This webinar is going to update that data. So we're going to look at the second peak of COVID-19 and how consumers are reacting. A little bit more about Fratsky Media first. We're a digital marketing consultancy laser focused on helping mid-sized companies transform into digital leaders. And well, what does that mean? It means that we want to help mid-sized companies that have traditionally and historically underinvested in digital embrace digital so that they can leapfrog their competition and really create transformative growth. Here are a few of our featured clients. If you'd like to learn more about any one of these clients and some case studies, feel free to reach out at fratskymedia.com. We'll set up a consultation and we'll unpack some of the different case studies that we've been able to achieve. If you look at last month's webinar, we actually looked at some of these clients and how our different strategies have helped them really go above and beyond some of their goals, even during the pandemic. So today we won't be going into as many case studies. We'll just be giving you an update of some of the data that we looked at last month. I've also included though some new charts and new data that will continue to track. And so as the pandemic continues, this webinar will really be used as a place where we can continue to update you on some of the consumer trends that we're seeing. So how do we help clients, generally speaking? Well, you know, when people come to me for the first time, a lot of times they're discussing with me a website problem they may have, or an email marketing problem they may have, or a local search problem that they may have, right? But if you looked at digital marketing as an iceberg, those things that seem like problems are really just symptoms. They're above the surface. The real problems are below the surface, what we can't necessarily see with our naked eye. So yes, your website may be messed up, but that's mostly because of the fact that you probably don't have the right people, process, or partners or platforms in place, or you don't have a documented strategy with goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics. And so Fratsky helps our partners. Of course, we help them sort of in that above the surface stuff, but we always will start with the below the surface and help to try to drive transformation internally with our partners and teach them how to fish rather than just giving them a fish. And that's what makes us a little bit different as a consultancy. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about consumer trends and how COVID-19 is really accelerating the consumer's digital first mindset. Then I want to talk about what's the future. So forecasting consumer behavior in a post-lockdown world. So let's start things off with State of the Union and stay-at-home orders. What we're starting to see here in July is that many states that were in the process of reopening in June are actually either hitting pause or reversing course, right? And going back to lockdown and stay-at-home orders. So what you're seeing here is the sort of the dark yellow states are the ones that are saying, hey, you know what, never mind. Not only are we hitting pause on our reopening plans, but we're actually reverting back to lockdowns and shutting down things like bars, restaurants, and public parks and things like that, right? So California, Nevada are a couple of examples. Then what you're seeing are in the sort of the darker blue are states that are reopened. The lighter blue are in the process of reopening, and the sort of lighter yellowish color or brownish color there are states that are hitting pause on their reopening plans. So as you can see, in July, we're not out of the woods yet. In June, there was a lot of optimism around, okay, things are starting to reopen, but now as we're seeing that second peak come into place, governors in the various states are really looking to slow that down. So what does that ultimately mean? It means that as malls are shutting back down and there's restrictions going into place again, we're not going to be able to revert back to the old way. And there's still an increased digital demand from consumers. And so there really needs to be an increased digital spend from you and your business, not only on if you're a B2C company, but also if you're a B2B company. And we have some data that will showcase around both of those in a few moments. So here are the states that are currently requiring face masks And generally speaking, what you're seeing is on the coasts, you're seeing pretty aggressive adoption around face mask requirements, but not every state is doing this, right? And so generally speaking, the states that are allowing those sort of requirements to go into place are trying to drastically change the curve, and those are also the states that we're seeing that are tending to pause or revert back to the stay-at-home orders. All right, so let's jump into consumer sentiment. So in this chart, what we're showcasing, or in this graph, what we're showcasing is the level of concern. And generally speaking, in the US, it's continuing to drop. So we're looking here at the percentage of consumers who say that they are extremely, very, or quite concerned about the coronavirus situation in their country. And so now this new data was polled around June 29th to July 2nd. And 74% of Americans polled said that they were, quite concerned or very concerned about the pandemic. So this is a decline from last month's polling. So in May, it was around 79%. So we're seeing the number of people who say that they're concerned about their country's sort of ability or to overcome the coronavirus is declining. Now, what I've done here is I've compared this to China, which, as we know, had the virus first and then reopened things. And what's interesting here is that China has actually seen an uptick in terms of the level of folks who say that they're concerned about it. So it was on a pretty steep decline, going from 56 to 50 to 41%. Now we've seen a slight little uptick, which is interesting to think about, given how much you trust the data coming out of China one way or another. Some of the stuff that they're showcasing in terms of the data suggests that, they were sort of out of the woods, but they're now starting to sort of be more concerned. Where in the US, the data that you're seeing is the peak sort of declined and then went back up to the second peak, but the consumer is becoming less and less concerned. So in this chart, we're looking at the expected length of disruption, and that continues to grow. So when asked in March, 52% of Americans polled said that they expected the pandemic situation to last 6 months or longer. That then went up to 68% in May, and then in June, it jumped drastically 80 to 81%. So folks are now saying, hey, you know what, as we get into the 4th and 5th month of the pandemic, that they're starting to see that, okay, we're not going to get over this in 6 months. So how does this break down? Well, this is a breakdown of that 81%. So all three of these numbers combined come to 81%. So 12% of folks polled said that they think it's still, that it's going to take longer, 6 months or longer, right? 33% of the consumers polled said that they think it'll take up to a year to overcome. And then 36% said longer than a year. All right, so we're starting to see that more and more people are thinking that this will take longer to overcome. Now, this is a new chart in this conversation that we didn't have last time, and this is looking at the level of optimism. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, is that the level of optimism is declining, right? So on one side of this chart, we're looking at the number of people who said that they're not optimistic at all. There's about 10% of people polled. And then on the other end here, we're looking at people who are very optimistic about the US overcoming the COVID-19 outbreak. And it sits at about 16%. So a majority of Americans are actually pretty neutral on this. They fall somewhere in the middle, not necessarily feeling too doom and gloom, but not throwing their hat in the very optimistic category either. So this showcases how the level of optimism has declined over time in the US. So, in May, 50% of Americans said that they were confident in our ability to overcome the outbreak. Now in June and July, we're looking at 41%. So, why is that important from a consumer behavior standpoint? Well, when consumers are feeling more optimistic about the country's outcome, then they're going to feel more optimistic about how they leverage their money. Or would they rather keep things in savings, or do they want to go out and make big purchases? But there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect around the overall optimism and how people feel about the financial impacts of the pandemic. So if you look at these numbers, this was back in May, only 34% of Americans felt like the pandemic would have a drastic negative impact on their personal finances. But at the same time, those same Americans felt like that, 87% of those same people polled felt like this would have a drastic negative impact on the US economy. So people had a lot of confidence in their ability to save money and their ability to survive. And they didn't have a lot of confidence though in how this, how the economy would react. So as we saw the level of optimism declining, you would think that consumers would maybe feel less confident about their personal finances. But what we're seeing in June is actually there is a decline in the number of people who say that they think this will negatively impact their finances. So in May, let's take a look back, 34% said, hey, I think this is going to negatively impact my finances. But now in June, it's declined. So 24% of people polled said that they think it will negatively impact their finances. So people have actually gotten more confident about their ability to survive from a financial standpoint. And that could be for a variety of reasons, whether it's the injection of capital that we're seeing in the unemployment world, or some of the different laws that have been passed around PPP loans that have made it a little bit easier for small businesses to diversify how they spend it and how they pay it back. So there definitely is an interesting disconnect between this dropping level of optimism and consumers feeling confident about their finances. All right, let's look at the consumer mindset and how things are leaning digital first. So I talked about this last month, and I think it's important to reiterate, the power of habit. And it takes about 66 days to transform a habit loop. And so as the pandemic continues to drag on, we're now going through more and more of these 66-day habit loop reformations. And what that means is that, at the beginning, if you leaned more into digital shopping solutions, then by the time things opened back up, you would have gone through 66 days and you probably still would have shopped more online than going back out into the world of brick and mortar. Now we're going through a whole nother set of 66 days. So I really feel like this is going to put consumers in a mindset where they're going to lean even further into digital. So as companies, we really need to be thinking about how can we invest in digital in a meaningful way quickly and go from a crawl, walk, and run of what are the things, if we're not doing anything, what are the things that we can start doing very quickly and efficiently and practically. And then what is our long-term roadmap for how do we want to capitalize even more on these trends in the future? So if we look at shopping, 38% of consumers say they are cutting back on their day-to-day shopping, the day-to-day things that they buy. So this is kind of a new trend where as we think the pandemic will take longer to overcome, people are pulling different levers internally in their households and cutting back on some of the spending. Where we've seen the biggest decline is around big purchases. So 66% of consumers say that they're going to delay a big purchase like a car, vacations, home appliances, etc. Right? So people are feeling confident about their finances, likely because they're cutting back and tightening the purse strings. What are some of the things that we're seeing from a post-outbreak behavioral change? Well, 45% of pre-existing e-commerce purchasers say that they plan to spend more online after the outbreak, right? So this is what I was talking about with that 66-day habit loop. More people who previously did online shopping are saying after the pandemic, I'm just going to keep leaning into online shopping. 33% of purchasers who weren't doing online shopping before the pandemic say that they will go ahead and continue shopping online as well post-pandemic. So what you're going to see here is a decline in sort of brick and mortar traffic. It's probably going to push brick and mortar to think about taking up less of a physical footprint and increasing more around their digital infrastructure. And then a couple other interesting things. 10% of folks said that they were going to cancel their gym membership. I don't know about you, but I'm certainly considering that as well. Not necessarily because of concerns around catching the coronavirus at a gym. I wouldn't be the first one to go to a gym in this pandemic, but more around the fact that being at home has opened my eyes to what I can accomplish at home, right? So, we bought some different things like yoga mats and kettlebells and, running shoes and things like that. And it's just been overall easier to go take a run around the block than go run on a treadmill at the gym. It's been easier to just do weight exercises at home than it would be to, load the kids in the car, drive the 15 minutes down the road to get to the gym, check the kids in at the kids club, all of those things that you have to sort of do to get up and running. It's a lot faster at home, right? So canceling the gym membership definitely seems like something I'll be doing. But 40% of consumers say that they're going to eat out at restaurants less. 26% say that they're going to visit bars or pubs less often. This is all post-pandemic. So this just showcases, this kind of at-home everything mindset that people are getting more and more accustomed to and trained around. This to me is one of the most telling things, because during the pandemic, as there's been an increase in digital traffic of sites, now consumers are saying that the brands that met their needs during the pandemic and had a good, clean UI experience and had a great digital experience, made things easy for them, removed friction, made it a frictionless shopping experience, had things dropped off at their front door, right? The brands that did that the best are now going to earn customer loyalty. So post-pandemic, if your brand was able to achieve a great digital experience and give customers joy and delight in the frictionless experience online, those customers are going to continue shopping with those companies in the future. So I think that's really important, because as companies as states are going back and retrack, moving back into their lockdown orders and things like that, it just doubles down on the fact that, we really need to, as companies, be investing in our digital experience so that when things get back to normal, we've now brought in potentially new customers. And B2B is not immune. So often when I share some of this data, companies that are on the B2B space say, oh, that sounds like a B2C problem. Well, Fratsky Media, at the end of the day, we work with B2C clients, but we work with a lot of B2B clients too, in the manufacturing world and whatnot. And this data is affecting them as well. Some pre-pandemic data collected by McKinsey showcased that more and more B2B buyers were preferencing sort of this self-serve model. So being able to go through the research, evaluation, order, and reorder phase digitally over the years has become more and more important, right? And that's before the pandemic. Then you go into the pandemic, and that sort of need and that want for digital first B2B experiences has only doubled, right? Twofold. So there is a definite and clear need for B2B companies to be investing in their digital experiences. At the same time, still having sort of your traditional sales teams and your interactions and your phone calls and your in-person meetings, that's all going to be important. But really you want to think about, how can we reduce friction for the customer and enable them to make purchases for you, with you, without ever having to have someone interact or make that sale, right? So what's the future? This hasn't changed from last month, but I will say that I'm doubling and tripling down on some of these different things. So at home everything, whether it's a work, gym, coffee shop, bar, restaurant, etc., right? Folks are going to invest more and more on the household. They're going to put their personal priorities first around their family and their home life. Consumers are going to hold companies more accountable. What we started to see this week was actually companies starting to announce, some of their more drastic responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. So Walmart, Target, Best Buy, Home Depot, Lowe's have all said now nationally there's going to be a face mask requirement for entering their stores, right? And this is because some corporations have essentially grown tired of there being different standards from state to state to state, but not even there, the trickle-down effect of there being different standards from county to county, from city to city. And so, corporations are starting to make decisions on how they're going to tackle the pandemic. And consumers are going to hold those companies accountable for that. So if Walmart says that, hey, we're going to require face masks in every store across the US, customers are going to check in on that, and they're going to hold them accountable digitally. And then finally, these final 2 points here, the quality of experience is going to matter. So the companies that achieve the best digital experience are going to win customers once things open back up and get back to normal. And then the second part here is the digital winners are going to gain additional market share and overtake the digital laggards. And that's going to be through mergers, acquisitions, bankruptcies, et cetera. So what are we seeing? We're seeing this already. We're seeing that JCPenney's filed for bankruptcy, and a lot of other companies that are traditionally brick and mortar have done the same. They followed suit. We're seeing that there's a consolidation within the tech industry. So Uber just purchased, I believe it's Postmates, right? So we're seeing consolidation there. In my personal LinkedIn feed, I'm seeing a lot of SaaS companies that are consolidating, right? So we're starting to see the effects of the pandemic, where there's going to be a mass consolidation, and the people that are winning digitally are going to be the ones that survive in the long term. And that's why it's so important for your company to invest in digital. All right, so let's recap. Consumer trends. Optimism, unfortunately, is declining. But what's the future? Digital first. So more and more, we need to be making sure that we have a crisp website, that we're thinking about SEO and how we gain new customers through organic traffic, that we're thinking about how do we engage with our customers from a social media or an email standpoint. These are areas that we need to be investing in. Before we wrap up, I just want to showcase some of the resources that we have available to you. Please go ahead and follow this link over to the COVID-19 Resource Hub. Here you can find our multiple webinars, podcasts, and articles around what's happening in the COVID-19 space and how we can help you get back to business. In addition, you can listen to the Back to Business podcast, where we're actually talking to mid-sized business owners about what are some of the things that they're doing. And hopefully there are some great takeaways here that you can learn from as you're adjusting to this new normal with your business. And so with that, thank you so much for joining us today. Please feel free to reach out as well on Fratsky. Okay. And the final resource is me. Please feel free to give me a call directly or an email. My information is here on the screen. I want to hear from mid-sized businesses that are struggling right now. And I want to see what are some of the things that we can do to help you thrive and help you grow so that your business is around for years and generations to come. You know, one of the things that we see so much with mid-sized business leaders and owners is that they're working so hard in the business that they forget to work on the business. And so Fratsky Media can really be your strategic partner to help unlock transformative growth in the digital space. Well, everyone, I hope that you're doing well. I hope that you're staying healthy. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out, and we'll continue to update this data as the information becomes available. So look out for another webinar soon. All right, take care. Thanks, everyone.